morning, everyone. Can you hear me okay? No? Not yet? Can you hear me now? Okay, good. So, uh, actually, what I'd love all of us to do, if you're a man, could you reach around your right wrist and take your right pulse with your left hand? If you're a woman, reach around with your right hand and take your left pulse with your right hand. Okay? So what I want you to do is when you're taking your pulse, just kind of push down until you feel, let's just call it the point of maximum intensity, where you feel the pulse under all three fingers as strong of a place as you can find it. Kind of push your fingers in and try to feel all three pulses the best that you can, okay? And it's better if you reach around like this and reach around like this than doing it like this. So when you do that, do you all feel kind of three pulses? Okay. Now what I want you to do is I want you to kind of manipulate your fingers a little bit where those three pulses become super smooth. So just play with like moving your fingers up and down a little bit and see if you can find a place where the pulse seems a little bit smoother than it did in the beginning when you first started. Do you feel that place? When you understand the dynamics of the pulse, there's three levels of the pulse. The blood swirls around the outside of the pulse, but in the middle it goes straight through. So the one in the middle is going to be the most coherent. And the ones on the outside are going to be banging off the sides of your arteries. So right now we're looking, when you first put your fingers on the pulse, you're getting a little bit of the banging on the side of the artery, and it feels a little bouncier, a little bit stronger. So what I want you to do is kind of go down, feel that strong pulse, but then just play with the pressure of your fingers just a little bit, and all of a sudden it gets smooth. I taught this to second graders, and I would just say, can you go to the place where the three bumps become one bump? And they're like, I got it. So don't overthink this. Do you all feel that place? Nice. Now, while you're in that place, if you let your fingers sort of rise to the surface a little bit, do you feel it gets bumpy again? Just a little bit. Very subtle. If you go right back down into that middle zone and you manipulate your fingers just right, it feels like the pulses are almost beating horizontally this way versus this way. Do you feel that place? So if you could just sort of hang out in that place for me while I kind of tell you a little story about how the pulse turned out to be a healing technique quite powerfully. In fact, in Tibet and different parts of Asia, taking the pulse was not just a diagnostic tool. It was you put your hands on the pulse and you create a healing response. You create a level of awareness where the body becomes more aware of the problems as problems, and when the body recognizes a problem as a problem, it elicits the natural healing response. So the pulse is sort of a self-referral tool to wake the body up to the underlying imbalance, and when the body becomes aware of that, there's a spontaneous healing effect. So as you guys just kind of hang out in your pulse today as I talk to you, and I'm going to guide you through more of this as we dig deeper. I was teaching this course, probably must have been the late 1980s in LA. And I actually traveled around the country, believe it or not, teaching this pulse diagnosis course. During this particular course, one of the guys in the back of the room fainted and fell off his chair, literally fell off his chair on the floor. And we were like, oh my God, man dies in LA taking his pulse. I'll never teach this course again. But he survived, and we took a break and he wanted to continue the course, so we said, okay, sure, we can continue, and we did. And after the course, he said, you know, it was really weird because I've only fainted once before in my entire life, and that was about 10 years ago. I was in Mexico, and for whatever reason, I started getting really faint and nauseous, and I completely blacked out. But ever since I blacked out, I've had this pain in my liver area, chest area, and mid-back area. It would wrap around the side of my chest here, and it never went away. I've had it for 10 years. I've been to every doctor, every specialist, you name it. I came to this pulse course hoping I could kind of figure it out for myself. I've been trying to solve this problem for a decade with no success. And I said, and he said it was really weird because, you know, I started having the same fainting feeling that I had 10 years ago while I was taking the pulse. And I said, "You're going to be okay?" And he said, "Yeah." And I said, "Can I get your phone number?" This is before cell phones and everything. I said, "Can I call you in a couple weeks and see how you're doing?" He goes, "Oh, yeah. So I call him up a couple weeks later, and I said, "How you doing?" He goes, "You know, that pain in my ribs and my chest, liver area is gone." He goes, "Ever since I took that pulse course and I fainted, and I had the exact same feeling of nausea and dizziness and faint that I had 10 years ago, I basically had the exact same sort of healing crisis during the pulse course, and I blacked out. And ever since then, my pain has been gone." Now, I used to go back and teach at that same place in LA. It was in Pacific Palisades, and I saw him many times, years and years later, and the pain went away, and it stayed away. So I went back to my teacher in India, and I said, "Did you know about this thing? People take their pulse, and you know they get healed." And he goes, "Oh yes, that's miracle therapy." I'm like, "You got to be kidding me, right? Miracle therapy? Like, what is that?" And so that was super fascinating for me that this could be this kind of an effect, right? So then we have 6 children, and at one point we had 3, right? Because they come in sequence. And when we had 3, there was the first 3 were 2 years apart, so there were a lot of little diapers running around, and that was when I was with Deepak Chopra, and I was traveling in a different city every weekend for 8 years when I was with him for 8 years, teaching this pulse course and other things. And so I'm gone away from the weekend. There's no cell phones. You can only really check in, you know, limited. So I knew the kids were sick. So when I come home, and Ginger, my wife, said, "Janaki's been she's her oldest, she's been throwing up and she's been sick all weekend. I think she might be breaking her fever tonight." And Devaki, our second, is throwing up, just started throwing up. So she's going to throw up for the rest of the night and probably all day tomorrow. And little Austin, he is got a fever, so chances are he's going to be throwing up any minute. You're in charge. I'm going to bed because I've been up all weekend and I'm exhausted. Rightfully so, right? I mean, you know. So I went to the kids. So I went to my daughter's bedside, and I kneeled by her bed, and she had a fever, and I took her pulse, and I did exactly what I'm going to teach you guys how to do, okay? So we're going to go back to the pulse, and I went to the pulse, and I tried to find that place. In Western medicine, there's 3 levels, K1, K2, K3. K2 is when the arteries are going right through, and in Ayurveda, we call that the gap. It's the gap between the top of the lake and the bottom of the lake, right? It's the middle of the lake. The top of the lake is turbulent and changing throughout the day, and the bottom of the lake is pretty still. One of the most non-changing parts of our planet is the bottom of the ocean. So we're going to go into that junction point, gap between the 2 pulses, right? So you go to that pulse, and if you guys want to do this with me, it's kind of fun. So we go to that pulse, and how you do that is you manipulate your fingers where you feel the pulse become smooth, not pounding, so 3 pumps under each finger. You manipulate your fingers just right, and it feels it's like it's softer, and the pulses are sort of all beating together as one. Do you all feel that? Am I crazy asking you to feel this? So now what I want you to do is I want you to take that feeling and like you're dragging a mouse, drag that feeling of smoothness up into the surface of the pulse where it's more turbulent. So as you go up, it does feel more turbulent. Do you feel that? Now just drop back down and recapture the smooth pulse. Go back, feel it again, and now let's drag it up again. And then at some point, it gets kind of incoherent. So you drop back down to the junction point and see if you can feel that pulse where it's smooth again. And keep going back to the smooth pulse where you're in the middle of that artery and your fingers are lined up so you feel almost like one pulse running through it. And then as you come up, it feels a little incoherent, starts banging on your fingers a little louder. Then drop down to the middle pulse, recapture that smooth, and then drag it up. And keep dragging that smooth pulse up, down, and come back down, grab it again, come up again till it gets a little bit incoherent, and then drop down again. Keep dragging it a little further each time, a little further each time, a little further each time, until you keep doing this, and all of a sudden, you're feeling the whole pulse feels like the middle pulse. And this does take a while, but keep playing with that as I continue my story, right? So I did that, and with Janaki's pulse, my oldest, she was like, it took a while for me even to find the smooth pulse. It wasn't there. She had a fever, her pulse was raging. And after a while, I found the middle pulse. I could line it up and I could feel the arteries, the blood going through the middle. Then I just started dragging it up and coming back down and dragging it up, coming back down. Keeps kind of bringing that smooth pulse up to the surface. Surface of the lake is where you see all the waves and the turbulence, the normal changes of the day. It's where all the stress is in your pulses on the surface. So I just dragged it up until the pulse was completely smooth. Then I went on to the next kid, and I kneeled by Devaki's bed, and same thing, she had a raging fever, and I found after 5 or 10 minutes, it probably took me a half hour to balance their pulse, found it, dragged it up, dragged it up, dragged it up, found that pulse was finally smooth throughout the entire surface of the pulse. It was all smooth. It felt like the middle pulse the whole way through. This is what a balanced pulse feels like. You balance it for them. And when the pulse is balanced, it means that the body is now aware of everything at the same time. Where when it's raging, the body's attention is on a specific thing. So you want to try to get the body where it's sort of omnipresent. The body's self-awareness is aware of everything at the same time. And there's no, as we talk about, we're teaching this pulse course this week, we'll dive into this even deeper, what that all means. But the idea is that you feel this smooth pulse throughout the entire thing. It's really quite a beautiful feeling. And then I went on to my son Austin and did the same thing to his pulse. And then I went to bed and woke up. The kids woke up, and there was no more throwing up. There was no more fever. And we had a wonderful day the next day. And my wife was like, "You got to be kidding me. How did you do that? Really? You did like that? Like, it wasn't fair, right?" I mean, she didn't really say that. She would never say that. But she was just like, wow, how did that happen? And that's the beauty of the pulse, is that you can, that it actually enhances self-awareness. It's very similar to, there's a technique we talk about in Ayurveda, it's called marma therapy, and the original technique that I learned in India on marma therapy was based on something we've all done before, where you take your hands and you kind of go like this. Let's do this together, right? And you take your hands and you go like this, and you can kind of feel your own energy a little bit, right? Do you feel that little pressure? So when you're doing that, ask yourself, where are you feeling that? Take a guess. Just shout it out if you know. In your hands, right? You're feeling it in your hands, right? That's what you're feeling. So the technique, the marma therapy technique, is actually to put your hands over the major marmas. And the instruction for the therapist is to, you guys can totally do this, it's actually quite beautiful, is to put your and your left hand is under and the right hand is over. And you put your attention on your hands, because that's when you're interacting with yourself, that's what you're feeling. You're feeling yourself. So when you put your hands over that, to make sure that you don't think you're the healer, because you're not, you're a facilitator of the self, right? So you put your hands like this, and now the instruction for the person on the table is to put their attention in between my two hands, right? And the instruction for me, the therapist, is to put my attention on my hands. The patient is interacting with their self. I'm interacting with myself, but we're both creating this field, an enhanced field of self-awareness. I'm being more aware, self-aware of myself. They're being more self-aware of their self. We're creating an enhanced field that they're both interacting in. The idea is that you're not actually the healer, right? So it's this kind of idea that when you actually create this effect, you're not engaged in the process of healing. You're just a facilitator of self-awareness, and the body takes care of the healing, which is really quite beautiful. So how does that work? Like, how does this work, that you take your pulse in the middle and then all of a sudden they get better? And I saw this happen. I've been teaching this for decades and decades. When I first went to India, my teacher, who was a pulse diagnosis expert, basically asked me to just follow him around like a puppy, which I did for a year and a half. And he would go around and take people's pulses, and I would just see patients with them all day. And my job was to take my own pulse all day and write down what I felt. Write down. That's what I did. And if I didn't have a question, there was no discussion. Wasn't like, okay, team, this is lesson one. It wasn't like that. It was like, we're going to just hang out together, and if you have a question, I'm here to answer it. But if there was no question, this is a short version of the story. So along the way, so it went on, and I would have a question and then more questions. And the question that blew me away, that got me hooked on this whole idea of pulse diagnosis, was I took my pulse, and I would write down the time of day and the activity I was doing and things like that. And I had a question, because I noticed that, and I was very proud of myself for having such a clear question, that I could tell that the pulse was changing during the day. It wasn't the same. Just like when you look at a lake, it's calm in the morning, it's turbulent in the day, it gets calm in the afternoon, right? That's what happens, it's changing. And actually, I'm going to give one more satsang at night, and that's going to be on the 6th, and I'm going to tell you exactly why that happens, according to the changing frequencies of light from the sun, is why that happens. We'll talk about that in detail. The science of actually Vata Pitta Kapha. Why Vata Pitta Kapha exists is because the frequencies of light from the sun change from moment to moment and season to season. It's kind of really cool. But that'll be another discussion. So where was I? What?
It changes over the day.
Oh, yeah. So the question, yes, thank you. My question was, why does it change throughout the day? And he got all excited and told me that, oh my gosh, this is all about the frequencies of light. This is the changing circadian rhythms. These are different times of day, and this is the Vata time of day and the Pitta time of day and the Kapha time of day, and you should be doing these. And it turns out that now we have Nobel Prize-winning circadian medicine that tells that there are biological clocks, and that for most of us are completely out of sync with our nature's circadian rhythms. And this is a way that when you actually are feeling the pulse change in harmony with nature, you're aligned with those circadian rhythms. And I was like, are you telling me that I could actually feel the same circadian rhythms that sort of compelled the birds to fly south and the whales to migrate and the trees to turn red and fall, the leaves fall, And he goes, yeah, that's exactly what you're feeling. And I was like totally blown away by that. That I could actually feel, like, why do birds fly south? What makes them go? Like, why do they do that? And all of a sudden, you're telling me that you can actually be in tune with that subtle thing. And that was what knocked me over and got me so hooked on Ayurveda, because the more you learn about Ayurvedic medicine, you realize one most powerful thing, that the more subtle it is, the more powerful it is. And in Ayurveda, you look at the microbiome, right? We can't see those little bugs. They govern everything you think and say and do. They can tell from a bug of a little toddler whether he's going to be a doctor, a lawyer, or an artist. They can tell that. But we can't see them. In the Rig Veda, almost 5,000 years ago, they talked about these invisible bacteria called krimi. And they talked about how you wouldn't want to kill them, even though they know they could be good or bad. You want to change the environment, change the host. Profound insight, really, that we're only just beginning to understand today. The circadian rhythms, can you see them? No, but we can feel them, actually, those kind of things. And, and there's one more very subtle thing that we can't feel that governs pretty much everything. And that is how this healing effect actually happens in your body. And they're actually due to ultra-weak photon emissions that are coming out of your DNA. Thousands of them per minute are being released out of your DNA. And these are photons of light, right? So they don't just hang out in you. Science, these ultra-weak photon emissions, or also sometimes called biophotons, actually carry information in your body. They actually are information-carrying particles of light. And more recently, they discovered that our thoughts are carried by this light, these photon emissions, because nerves firing other nerves doesn't explain how humans can think so fast. Not all of us can think so fast, but even then, I sometimes feel like I think a little on the slow side. But turns out that it's these photons of light that carry our thoughts, which is really quite beautiful. It's also really interesting that these photons of light can be either coherent or incoherent. And most of the photons coming out of your DNA, unfortunately, are related to DNA damage. And they're very incoherent. And they're actually damaging to you and the people around you. You've been in situations where you walk into a room, right, and it doesn't feel great. It's real stressful, kind of not a good energy. Well, you're feeling a lot of incoherent photon emissions that are damaging. This is actually called the it's called the bystander phenomena, where they put monkeys who were irradiated for cancer therapy, and they put a healthy monkey next to them, and they found that in short order they measured the mechanism of that sickness, and it was the incoherent photon emissions from the DNA damage from the cancered monkey affecting the healthy monkey. So what's even more interesting is that when you actually meditate or do yoga or breathe or take the coherent pulse in your pulse, I don't know, I have science for that, by the way, just kidding, but not really kidding. Because whenever you become coherent and you meditate and still your nervous system and train the natural silence of nature, your photon emissions become coherent. And it's those photon emissions that are coherent that carry information. And it's not only information that they carry. There's something called Bocon's phenomena, which the studies show that those photon emissions literally carry your intention, which is like super cool. Because that means that when you think about prayer, for example, we all have heard of people praying for someone having an effect. And their studies have shown that it could be the most amazing drug of any drug ever invented. But there's also studies that show that it doesn't work so well. so it's never been really taken seriously. But there's plenty of science, plenty of it, that shows that prayer does work. So what is the difference between prayer working and not working? Could it be that when the prayer, the one who's praying for someone else, is either, not creating enough coherent photon emissions to carry that intention, and that intention, of course, would be carried obviously within your body, but it also could be carried at great distances. When I lived in India, every weekend or every chance we had, we found there was another distance healer. If you've been to India, you probably know this. And you would go visit a distance healer who would either take your pulse or look at a picture and take your pulse and then heal someone at great distances. This wasn't a foreign thing or a weird thing. It was a normal thing in that culture. That's people went to healers to have this distance healing effect, and everyone swore by these benefits. So it's a real thing, and now we have real science to explain why it might actually be something that we can all actually take advantage of. And that's what this healing of the pulse is about. When you take your pulse at the middle, you're feeling this coherent pulse. And when you're getting that coherent and you actually are now initiating some type of an intention, you can have a healing response. Now let's dive a little deeper if you guys are hanging in there with me. So it turns out that there's a cause of disease in Ayurveda, and the cause of disease in Ayurveda is something called pragyaprad. Pragyaprad means the mistake of the intellect, right? Where your crazy mind starts thinking that it's separate from the underlying field of intelligence or consciousness from which we come, right? So we all, I think, quantum physics, even Einstein understood that there was an underlying field that was intelligent. Max Planck, the father of quantum physics, he understood that there was a field, this is back in the 1930s, there was a field and it was intelligent, and it pervaded everything. And then science came along and said, oh, no, it's random, everything's random, nothing's intelligent. The fields could not be creating all these particles, and then these particles become matter, and all of it comes from this intelligent field, and there's some intelligence behind all this stuff that we see. It can't be true. So one scientist, researcher, did the math, and he said, if it were random, all this stuff that we're being and seeing, he said it would be like a hurricane plowing through a junkyard and spinning everything up and assembling a fully functioning airplane that you can get up and fly, which ain't going to happen. And that's how the math turns out. It's just not possible that things are. That when you look at this underlying field of intelligence, quantum fields, unified fields, fields of intelligence or consciousness, those fields become particles, and those particles become matter, right? So let's just say that that field is consciousness, and when consciousness becomes matter, that there's going to be a place where that field becomes matter. There's going to be a gap. There's going to be a junction point between the field and the physiology, or the consciousness and the matter. There's going to be a gap. So we got to find something on this planet that would function as both a particle, because it's physically manifested, and a field that is completely unmanifested. And we have that. Those are those things that are blasting out of your DNA about 1,000 per minute, and they're called ultra-weak photon emissions. So your biophotons are photons, and photons by definition are both particles and fields, and they can flip between the two, right? So that's the beauty of this understanding, is that if you could then put your attention at the junction point between consciousness and matter, you could have awareness like if you put a light in a doorway, the light shines into both rooms, right? So in the same way, if you take your pulse, you're in the middle pulse, you're having awareness of the of the field or the pulse below you and the one that's above you. And when you put your attention there, you have awareness of both frequencies. This is sort of why we have people for thousands of years were always made sure they were there for the sunrise, because the sunrise was a gap between night and day. And they were there for the sunset, and they would revere these transitions. They were there and had celebrations during the equinox and during the solstices, because these were gaps. We know that in pranayama we have kumbhak, which is a gap, a pause, or an extension between the breath. And it's in that gap that there's no thinking. Even a mantra, and then at some point you transcend the mantra and now you're in a non-thinking place. Marma therapy, another example. They're marma points, and marma points are said to be little access points or junction points between consciousness and matter. So they are right at that point. So in Ayurveda, it was like prevalent that we were supposed to be in reverence of these gaps in nature. These experiences where transitions from field to physiology are more manifest or more obvious to us. And that's what Ayurvedic pulse diagnosis is really about, is when you actually take your pulse and you feel that junction point. You're in the gap between the deep pulses, that consciousness field, the surfaces, the manifested field, and then you're right in the gap. And the more you drag that silence up, you can actually bring consciousness into the physiology. You can restore the memory of pure consciousness into every cell of the body. And that's the mechanism for how spontaneous healing takes place. Whether I'm doing this over someone's body, creating a field where they now similarly are becoming aware of the underlying field of intelligence in the physiology which may have lost its way. So there's something also digging a little deeper. There's something called quantum entanglement, which you may have heard of. Quantum entanglement is that when photons of light, for example, are entangled, and all the ones in your body are related to each other, they're entangled with each other. And if you were to observe one of those photons, the other one that it's entangled with would instantly change its spin or its frequency. So, and this was weird because Einstein knew about this, but it didn't really add up, because this happened instantaneously at great distances. You could have, one particle here and one particle in another galaxy. And if I observe this particle here, it would change the spin of that particle instantaneously, faster than the speed of light. Einstein called it spooky action at a distance. It didn't make any sense that could be true. So he didn't really put a lot of attention on it, but it was discussed. And now there's been study after study after study to show that entanglement is exactly very true. In fact, it's how quantum computing is going to work. Your laptop and cell phone computer is going to be actually run by quantum computing. It's your cybersecurity, for example, would be, let's say you're on your computer and all of a sudden someone hacks into your computer, which means that now I'm entangled with the hacker. As soon as that person hacks into my computer, it's going to change the spin of the photons in my computer, and I'll get an alert. My computer will completely shut it down. That is not 20, 30 years away. That's 5 or 10 years away. That's how cybersecurity, the medical imaging is going to be using quantum computing because of this same phenomena. It's a real thing. It's here, and it's something that Ayurveda discussed and knew about for thousands of years. So let's say now we're actually either meditating or doing kumbhak or breath retention or doing mantra or doing yoga, which is another gap in itself because it's a dynamic posture. At the same time, you're perfectly still on the inside. It's yoga. It's the union of the dynamic activity and the calm at the same time. These are laws of nature, like a hurricane. The bigger the eye of the storm, the more powerful the winds. The bigger and more profound you can establish the being or the calm in your nervous system, the more productive you can be on this planet. You don't have to live in the dangerous winds of the storm. You live in the eye of the storm. And you hail from that place of unlimited potential. It's that old saying in Ayurveda, it says, do less and accomplish more. But even better than that, do nothing in the eye of the storm and accomplish everything. That is the Vedic, one of my favorite Vedic principles. And that's exactly what it's about. If you were to pull back a bow in the Vedic science of Dhanurveda being the Veda of the bow, or the Veda of war, or being literally a spiritual warrior, and you pull back the bow, and you're moving this bow, which means your mind is not at rest, and then you shoot the arrow, good luck finding that arrow. You're never going to find it. But if you pull back the bow and establish being, and then perform action, it's called yoga style kuru kamani, first establish being, and then perform action, it's transformational. So we're looking to do that in our life. We're looking to entrain the gap, that experience of the junction between consciousness and matter in every area of our life, whether we're meditating, whether we're doing kumbhaka, or whether we're doing sunrise or sunset, or seasonal cleansing during the equinox, or whatever it might be. This whole idea of being in reverence of that gap entrains that awareness of the self at that junction point where you have ability to be aware of the field and the physiology at the same time, restore the memory of pure consciousness at that deep level. Okay, so now if we were to dig a little deeper and we were to meditate and bring our attention to that junction point, and then you brought your attention to that junction point where the photons are entangled with the photons in your body that have lost their way, have become more particle in nature, and they don't carry the thoughts, they don't carry the information that they carry when they're coherent. So when your body becomes from field to physiology, those particles become part of the incoherent and even damaging to a point. And a lot of those particles are more particle and they're actually more dense. But the whole idea of Ayurveda, when they said pragya prad, which is to restore the memory of pure consciousness into every cell of the body, was to actually create, using meditation and these gap therapies, to create entanglement where instantaneously the particles that have lost their way, that are incoherent, that don't carry information anymore, are now woken up and become coherent. And now your body is carrying the memory of pure consciousness, restoring the memory of pure consciousness into every cell of your body. And that is literally what the Ayurveda predicted or talked about as the cause of all disease, or the restoration of disease, is restoring that memory of pure consciousness. And that happens when we meditate and become aware of that gap, or when you take your pulse, become aware of that gap, and then you're able to instantaneously restore that memory of the pure consciousness. So it turns out that Patanjali talked about this, and he talked about a sutra called Inner Light as a sutra for distance healing. And I want to read to you what Patanjali said about this. I thought it was quite profound, actually. I wrote a lot of notes. And here it is. It's really, I was like, you got to be kidding me, right? So this is what Patanjali wrote in the Yoga Sutras. Inner light, and by the way, light, another name for light are what? Photons, yes. So we're talking about the inner light being our ultra-weak photon emissions. That's what inner light means, right? You can't dispute that. And it says it's the knowledge of the subtle, hidden and remote. Subtle as atoms, hidden as treasure, and remote as distant lands. Isn't that beautiful? So if you were in a meditation and you would introduce that sutra, and you were then to introduce an intention, because we know that these photon emissions carry intention when they're coherent. So you're in meditation, we have science to show that that creates coherent photon emissions. And now we apply an intention, and then let it go. And then you introduce this sutra, inner light. And if you wanted to heal your body on the inside, the sutra for that is called nabi, or navel. Putting your attention on the navel is how you create more self-awareness on the inside of your body. So I thought it'd be fun to actually do this. Want to do it together? So what we're going to do is we're going to do a little breathing technique called Bhastrika. And I use Bhastrika as something I've been using for years called the 1-minute meditation. Because you can do Bhastrika for 1 minute and have a profound effect on your physiology. This only takes a short time, so we're not going to go over. But I do have a little time to tell you the science of Bhastrika. And instead of trying to memorize it and screw it up, I'll tell you exactly. So what's really cool about Bhastrika, and you know that's the bellows breath. You know what that all is, right? It's just where you take a big bellows breath. We're going to do 30 of those, then we're going to be still for a minute. That's the 1 minute meditation. 30 breaths, 30 seconds of being still, it's 1 minute. Well, the research shows when you do that, your brain slips into a gamma brainwave activity. And that gamma actually breaks up plaque in your brain. It's been shown to reverse Alzheimer's in mice, and they're actually doing studies on that for humans. So that's good. Will wake us all up. It's been shown to increase your memory. It's been shown to increase intercortical communication in your brain. It increases perception. It's been shown in studies. Gamma is the brainwave of the highest states of consciousness. It's an altruism. It provokes higher levels of self-awareness. And what's also cool about it is that excitation that you get from the Bhastrika creates about 15 minutes of parasympathetic dominance, where the brain stays in this higher state of gamma wave functioning for about 15 minutes, according to the studies, which is really cool. So we're going to actually take advantage of this gamma we're going to produce here in a minute. And we're going to then first introduce an intention. Do you want to heal yourself, or do you want to heal someone else? You decide. And if you want to heal yourself, you would then just repeat the word nabi, or navel in English is fine. Or if you want to heal someone at a great distance that you're concerned about, then you would just repeat the word inner light, okay, as we get into the mantra. So what we're going to do is we're going to breathe. First, we're going to set the intention. Then we're going to breathe for 30 seconds, and we're going to be still. And then in that, you can just very gently, during the exhalation, very gentle exhalation, sort of like Rukmini talked about this morning, where the breath almost is imperceivable. You don't hardly perceive it, very gentle. But as you feel that gentle breath after you do the Bhastrika, with each exhale, you're going to feel a little feeling of expansion. And with that expansion, just introduce the word either navel or inner light. Set your attention at the beginning, let it go, and just repeat this, and we'll heal a few things this morning. That all sound good? You all with me? Okay. So sit up, and we'll do 30 of the Bhastrika breaths. Here we go. Just be still, perfectly still. As you gently begin to breathe, very gently, during the exhale, feel that expansion. And with that expansion, repeat inner light, navel. And with each exhale, repeat that sutra. If you feel like you're getting flooded with thoughts, then let's do another just 10 Bhastrika breaths. Let's do that again. Here we go. And be still. This time reach down, grab your pulse. Go to that middle pulse. Manipulate your fingers till you feel the gap. And just stay in the gap. And repeat the sutra. And slowly open your eyes. And have a wonderful day, everyone.
I'd like to thank very much Dr. John Douillard. Let's give him a big hand for this talk. And he will offer his last workshop today at 12 noon on Breathe Away Aging. And this will be in the Annapurna Devi house. So looks like Breathing for Anti-Aging workshop. And then tomorrow he will start the Pulse Diagnosis course, which is a 4-day course from June 2nd to 5th. And this course will begin tomorrow with an inauguration ceremony at 11:30. And then the classes will be daily from 12 to 2. On the last day it will go until 3. So every day about a 2-3 hour class with Dr. John. And then the last day we'll have the graduation, and we'll give the student a certificate from the ashram. And if you want to register, just go to the reception front desk and you can sign up for the course. So Now we'll go over the schedule. We have a yoga class at 8 o'clock on the Bay platform, one class for all levels. At 9:50, brunch in the dining area. 11, the ashram welcome and history tour, living from reception. This is for the new guests or those who didn't do the tour. At noon, the workshop with Dr. John in the Annapurna Devi house. At 4, the afternoon yoga class. Same locations in the Bay platform. 5:50, dinner. 7, the Gita Parayana. We chant one chapter from the Bhagavad Gita in Sanskrit every night in the main temple with the priest. This is from 7 to 7:15. And then we have a short study on the Gita. It's open for everyone. And at 8 o'clock in the evening satsang tonight, we have a dance performance. And this is a classical Indian dance called a grand Bharatanatyam performance, Ananda, A Journey to Bliss, with Subha Parmar and her daughter, Madhu Parmar. They're both very gifted dancers. So we'll see if we can do it here. Otherwise, it will be in the main temple. We'll make an announcement about the location of the satsang. And we're also studying officially we're studying the celebration of Swami Srupananda's birthday. He's our spiritual teacher, and he's here now. The big event is on Saturday morning, but throughout the week, our priest is going to do all kinds of pre-birthday events, and we'll make announcements when we have more details. Now we're going to conclude with the final prayers. This is in page 98. Om, 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 Asatoma Satgamaya, Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya, Mrityorma Mritam Gamaya. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Peace Peace Peace. O adorable Lord of mercy and love, let us abide in Thee forever and ever. Om Bolo Sadguru Shivananda Maharaj Ki Jai. Om Bolo Swami Vishnu Devananda Maharaj Ki Jai. Please stand up for arati. Page 118.